Welcome back. David Heurtel in for Elias. Well, a new study from McGill University has highlighted an urgent need for increased funding for Montreal's bus network. Now, that's not news. We've been talking about that for a while. What is very interesting about this study that it reveals that, we can address different issues of overcrowding, reliability, and service frequency. So to help us make sense of all of this, I'm happy to be joined by Meredith Alousi-Jones, one of the researchers on the TRAM team that completed the study. Meredith, thank you very much for your time this morning.
Thanks for having me.
So the obvious first question is, why is it so important to have mass transit?
I mean, obviously, that's a great question, especially, I think, going forward as we're trying to reduce GHG emissions and promote more sustainable travel, such as transit. It's really important that the level of service that we provide with this public transit is adequate for people's needs in urban areas and outside. So it's not just a lesser option to the car or to other modes of transportation that people would prefer, but we want to make sure that people are happy to use transit and continue to use it going forward.
Yeah, I think it's very important to set this from the start. This is important, and there are reasons why this is important. Now, for the last few weeks and months, we've been talking about this arm wrestling between the city of Montreal and other municipalities with the provincial government about the funding. But beyond the funding itself, what needs to change, what needs to improve with the bus routes, the way we look at mass transit to get it back to the pre-pandemic levels, to make it performing better?
Right. Well, that was one of the main findings that we have in our study of the same level of service and the same budget that the STM provides or is working with is not going to attract the same level of ridership as it did pre-pandemic. People are asking for better levels of service. They have other options now, and they said, oh, well, why do I have to keep using transit if I can work from home or if I can take my car? So we need to make sure that the reliability is there. And that people believe that transit is a good option for them, even now, post-pandemic.
So what do you think we should be focusing on? Because you see the debates, you see what's going on in the news. What should we be doing? What should the STM, the other public transit agencies, should be doing that they're not doing enough of?
Right. So I think that obviously the STM is working with budget issues and has been for a while now. That's not something that we can just say, oh, we'll just increase service and spend a ton of money. But I think we need to look at where to cut service and where to optimize service. We know that the most frequent bus lines, the old 10-minute max ones that are now rebranded as the frequent bus lines, are the most important. They have the highest ridership. The people require them to work well and be reliable. So I think that's where most of the focus should go on, in ensuring the service on those frequent lines. And those that are maybe more costly to the STM to subsidize, that have less riders, that are less frequent, we can look at optimizing those lines, maybe rearranging the stops or even reducing the service in a way that doesn't impact people's lives too much.
So are we talking about biting the bullet and actually cutting some routes?
I think that there has to be a possibility. Obviously, having the government, provincial, municipal, or federal help with the budget is always the best option, as public transit is an important service to provide funding for. But now looking at where we are on the ground, STM has to do something, and it just requires a more optimal way of cutting service without it being devastating for the high ridership line.
All right. What else would you focus on?
I think that people's understanding of what public transit can do needs to be improved. So that goes to marketing or to STM's better communication of their service and their service provision. People, I think, have a high association of public transit taking them to work, whereas that's not the only thing that public transit can do. We can look at taking people to leisure destinations, to bigger parks, And that's something that I think will also improve people's perception of public transit and their use of it outside of work hours.
Now, a lot of the criticism I'm getting beyond the whole money thing, which you've addressed, is a lot of people take, the one example. There are many, but take the soccer mom. The kids, the groceries, take you to the soccer game, the school, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. Transit is doesn't seem, or maybe it's a perception issue, as you just addressed. It's about also not being adapted to some of these realities. Same thing for seniors, for example. It doesn't seem to be as helpful as maybe it was once. What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. It's funny that you bring up seniors, because that's actually one of our other studies that we're doing at the same time of how we can adapt public transit to older adults. Mm-hmm. Because as you mentioned, I think the key word here is adaptability. Mm-hmm. Public transit needs to be more adaptable to other purposes rather than just commuting to work or commuting to school. Whether that means providing more cargo space or increasing their schedules on the weekends when people might be needing to go to soccer practice or needing to go to destinations other than downtown and other core business areas. Mm-hmm. I think that that's something that the STM also needs to look at, of understanding the cultural shift that's happened with public transit post-COVID, that people, if they want people to use it more frequently, they need to diversify their service and make sure that it's more adaptable to more groups of people.
For me, the STM has always been part of my life. I mean, I went to elementary school in the old brown buses. That's how old I am with the STM. And so, but there is also this perception. And I don't know, again, and tell me if I'm off base, because you may not have touched on this in your study, but there's also a perception that the SDM somehow is mismanaged, that there's a ton of money being wasted. I mean, when I was growing up, and this was a known fact, I mean, the bus driver was not the richest man on the bus. And now today, I mean, you have bus drivers making over $100,000 a year, is easily the richest person on the bus. And again, this is just an image, but at the same time, there seems to be a lot being said about mismanagement, how there's a lot of waste. You talk about garages that, were supposed to cost $250 million, now cost over $500 million. What about the management itself of the STM and these public transit agencies? What are your thoughts on that?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, as you mentioned, that's not something we covered in the study, but definitely, I mean, it's as you've mentioned, talked about a ton in news and amongst my friends and family. And I think, in my opinion, that it tends to be oversimplified. Running an agency like the STM is not something that's straightforward, especially compared to, as you mentioned, when you were younger. Things have changed a lot. The urban environment has been much more complex than it used to be, and people have they demand more from their public transit services, and maybe there's a bit of a lag in terms of management at the STM in meeting those needs and meeting that demand. But it's not super straightforward and saying that, STM needs to be better run, we need to uphaul the system and everything will be fixed. It's much more complex than that. And I think that keeping the adaptability and the willingness of people to move forward using public transit, I think, is the key in making sure that it's a good mode for the city of Montreal.
This is very interesting because it's so important to go beyond just the political back and forth and go in depth on how to actually implement real solutions. So thank you so much, one, for this study, for what you're looking at, for your continued work, and for your time this morning.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Meredith Alousi-Jones, one of the researchers on the TRAM team at McGill University that's looking at transit issues and how to get busing and bus routes and bus service in a better place here in Montreal. We sure need it.